Welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to unbox and spray test the Sparmax Max 3 0.3mm airbrush. So a huge thank you to Sparmax Australia for supplying this airbrush to me. So as far as packaging goes, nice little case that you get with it. You can just click it closed and carry that with you. Nice and handy. As with pretty much every airbrush kit, you get the little tool to remove your nozzle. Also get this little cleaning brush, which is pretty handy. So it also comes with the single action adapter valve, something that I'm not going to bother using, but if you want it to run single action, this is what will make the airbrush do that. Some information on the single action air valve. So the single action air valve constantly releases pressure from the airbrush even when the trigger is not pressed. So if your compressor has an auto on-off pressure switch motor, will always continue to run. Then you've got your airbrush parts list and obviously the exploded diagram as well, showing you what parts go where when you do break it down. I'll probably do a video showing you how to pull it all apart, put it back together at a later stage. And then just some operating instructions as well. And here is the airbrush, 0.3mm needle with the adjustable end, so you can wind it in and out to control your trigger flow. 0.3mm needle nozzle setup, so great for fine work and broad spray. Straight off the bat feels nice and comfy. The only thing I'm picking up on is the trigger is on an angle which makes your finger sit relatively close to the cup, but I'm sure it's something you get used to. I airbrush with my finger sort of over the trigger anyhow, so it's not really going to affect me as much. But if you do want to sort of sit your finger directly on like so, that may be a little bit annoying. So just a quick close-up of the brush. One thing I'm loving is the solid handle without the cutaway. I actually prefer that. I know everyone's different, but I do like the solid handle. So there's a bit of weight to the brush, which is great. Makes it feel like there's some quality behind it. Looking forward to putting it through its paces. So I'm going to hook up my Iwata hose, the DT110. So for the purpose of the demo, I'm just going to use some Trident Indigo Blue. I'm going to put some reducer in first by Trident, just to thin the paint out. If you've watched my videos before, you know that I like to run my paint a bit thinner. The pressure that I'll be painting with today is 30 psi. And I just put my finger over the front, pull back a couple of times to bubble back, which mixes the paint for me. Pop the lid on and we're ready to rock. I'm also going to remove the air cap because I like to paint without that. Make sure if you do put your airbrush down, put it back in the holder. And it's always safer to sit it in like this because if you pull on the hose, it's not going to fall out. Whereas if you have it sitting in this part of the holder, if you pull on the hose, it can still fall out. Okay, so just give it a bit of a try. So remember, this is a double action airbrush. So you want to press down for air. Nothing will be coming out, right? So you can see, press down for air, nothing's coming out. When you pull back for paint, you're going to start to get paint coming out. So that's what double action is. Press down for air, pull back for paint. Make sure you keep the air pressed down at all times while you're doing whatever artwork it is you're doing. Try to avoid using it like a spray can. You don't want to do that. Takes a little bit more practice, but once you get the hang of it, then you'll be able to do a lot more with the airbrush. So it's spraying nice and smooth. Consistent lines as well. Let's try some straight lines. It's actually really smooth straight out of the box. I'd love to know how many of you guys actually have a Sparmax airbrush. It's been quite a while since I've had a go of one. I have to say the quality so far is pretty good. Nice and responsive. Feels a lot like an Iwata. See how fine we can go. Keep in mind this is straight out of the box. I usually like to run an airbrush for a little while. I find that the more you run them, the better they are. So straight out of the box, you can see how fine those lines are. Pretty happy with that. Let's try some real fine dots. So probably be better if I turn the pressure down a little bit. This is spidering out. Let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so I've lowered the pressure to about 25 psi. You can see I haven't added any more reducer to the paint, so it's doing pretty well. I reckon if I thinned that even more, which I might do, I'll just add some more reducer and we'll see if we can get it to perform even finer. Okay, so I've added a little bit more reducer. I mean, that's pretty fine. That's almost micron fine. So I could definitely feel the potential. See some real fine dots there. A little bit of intermittent between the line there, but you know what, that's, considering it's a new brush and literally just hooked it up and I haven't tweaked it as far as set up my ratio properly, I reckon once I play around with it more, I'll know exactly the mix which will work best for this particular brush. Okay, so considering we're at a lower pressure now, I'm still going to just try and see how it goes pumping on the paint, which it does nice and easily. So that's great. So you've got the versatility of it being fantastic for larger areas. I mean, this would work really well for murals, but you can also utilize this gun to do some real fine detail as well. So do a few more little dots and bits and pieces, see how she runs. That is pretty good. It's starting to tip dry a bit now. I think you agree that's pretty awesome performance for first time running. Okay, so to clean the brush, I like to tip the paint back into the bottle. Even though I have mixed it with some reducer, I'm not too worried because I like my paint a lot thinner. If you don't want to mix it in the original bottle, what I'd recommend is get a separate bottle with a pre-mixed color or just discard it totally. Once you've done that, I just use this cleaning pot here, stick the airbrush in there just to control the overspray. Put some water in there. You can get in there with your finger and just give the sides a bit of a clean a lot quicker. And then I like to loosen the handle. So you loosen that nut. You don't unscrew it totally, just enough so that you can pull the needle out. With the needle, just a bit of paper towel and just pull it through like that. Make sure that you go away from the point so that you don't stab yourself. That can be painful. Keeping the air press down on that trigger. Using just a squirty bottle. Squirt through the back of the airbrush. So a lot of people don't do this. I've got a video as well showing you how to clean any clips, which they're all very similar, all the gravity feed ones. I'll pop that link in the description below so you can check out that video as well. And once it runs clear, I can see there's still a bit of blue paint in there, so a little bit more water. If you're struggling to get rid of the paint, you can use some airbrush cleaner and that'll speed up the process. I'm just showing you with water, that way if you don't have airbrush cleaner you can easily follow along. And then carefully reinsert your needle. So when you're putting it back in, just go nice and slow and just keep pushing until you feel it seat. And let's give it a little sort of push like so. Just don't be forceful with it, don't jam it through because you could then damage the nozzle and flare it. And then you have all sorts of problems, you might need a new nozzle. And then once you put the needle back in, pull back a couple of times. Make sure that the nut is tight so that the needle goes back and forth. So you want to make sure that when you're pulling back, you can see that that needle's moving back and forth. Do not want to have it so that it's loose, like so. This is what a lot of beginners do, and what happens is if I just put some water in the cup to simulate paint, if I'm pulling back, watch this, see, nothing's coming out, right? Because that needle is not moving back and forth with that nut. So when I tighten it, watch what happens now, I pull back and paint's coming out. So that's a common thing. A lot of beginners, what they do is they'll clean their airbrush and then they'll get my attention in the class and say, oh, it's not working. You know, I've cleaned it all out, I've put paint back in and nothing's coming out. And that's the first thing I'll check, and 9 times out of 10, they just have forgotten to tighten that nut. So that's just a handy little tip for you, especially if you're a beginner. And then just a bit of water on the lid, clean off the excess paint. And then put your cap back on, screw the handle back on, and you're ready to rock. So just a quick close-up of the spray test. To continue your learning, be sure to check out some of the other videos and playlists that I've got listed here. And until next time, go grab your airbrush, do some amazing artwork yourself, and I'll see you again very, very soon in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.